Today's IABC webinar, Should I Seek Professional Certification? This webinar came about as a result of a number of members expressing interest in the certification exam, but not feeling confident in relying only on the online resources. We were lucky to find a member of the IABC International Executive Board, Deb Hileman, who has taken and passed both exams and is willing to share her tips with us. My name is Pat Fry, and I'm the Certification Chair and Conference Chair for the IABC Heritage Region this year. Amy Miller, our Region Finance Chair, is our tech guru for this webinar. Before Deb begins, Amy will review a few quick points to help you gain the most from this webinar experience.
Thank you, Pat. Everyone, if you would like to ask a question during the webinar, please use the chat button in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Just mouse down to the bottom of your screen and your toolbar will appear and you'll see the chat button. Deb will pause at various times to address the questions that have come in through the chat tool. We may also save some questions for the end. Today's webinar is being recorded. As a registered attendee, you will receive the following: a link to our survey very soon this afternoon. Please do send us your feedback. Also later this week, you'll receive a link to this recording and a link to Deb's slide deck for reference. And now back to Pat.
Okay, I'd like to introduce today's presenter. Deborah Hileman, SCMP, is a business leader and certified strategic communication management professional, SCMP, with more than 30 years experience in public and private companies and nonprofits. She has led high-performing communication teams in healthcare, manufacturing, insurance, financial services, and higher education, among others. Known as a voice of calm in the midst of chaos, Deborah has earned a reputation as a trusted strategist and advisor to boards and C-suite executives, operations, and other organizational stakeholders. Deb was named President and CEO of the Institute for Crisis Management in 2014. An IABC member since 1992, she serves on the International Executive Board as Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee. She previously served as a chapter president and regional director at large, among other roles. She is the immediate past chair of the Global Communication Certification Council. With that, I'll turn the program over to Deb.
Thank you, Pat. And thank you everyone for joining us here today. I'm really excited to join you and talk a little bit more about the Global Communication Certification Council and your opportunities to advance your career through professional certification. I wanted to start by just sharing a little bit about my own certification journey throughout my career. As Pat mentioned, I have more than 30 years communication experience across multiple disciplines. I've worked in marketing communications, PR, investor relations, employee relations, and a variety of other communication disciplines. I've been very active in professional associations since I was in college many, many years ago. So I always wanted to achieve accreditation. It was really a personal goal for me. And I was really comfortable that I had the skills and the knowledge to pass the test. But for me, there was really a challenge with the portfolio requirement. And both the Public Relations Society of America, their APR program, their accreditation program, and IABC's old accreditation program, both had a requirement for a portfolio. And that was really a problem for me because so much of the work that I did that would have been showcased in a portfolio was all confidential. I wasn't allowed to share it, unfortunately, even for something like that. So that was always kind of a roadblock for me to accreditation. So I was really excited when IABC introduced the certification program a few years ago, and knowing that it was going to test my knowledge, and there wasn't going to be a portfolio requirement or interviews or anything like that. There was a multiple choice test to test my knowledge, and I know I'm pretty good at multiple choice tests, so I was an early supporter and one of the first people who sat both for the CMP exam and also was in the very first group that sat for the SCMP exam last year. The maintenance requirements are fairly straightforward, and we're going to talk about that today. But they've really helped me as, especially as a senior level communicator, to focus my professional development activities and to make sure that I've got a good balance between teaching and learning, quite frankly, mentoring, teaching, and sharing things with other professionals and learning new skills myself. Very quickly, what is the Global Communication Certification Council? It is a governing body. It represents the communication industry worldwide. It's global, just as IABC is. And the council is the governing body for the certification program. It was designed really to help develop and launch an international level standard of communication excellence. And based not only on what we know here in the United States or in North America, but really to look at having a global standard for professionals at different points in their career. And although the GCCC is sponsored by IABC, it operates completely independently of IABC, which it has to in order to position us appropriately to achieve ISO certification. There's two types of professional certification currently being offered, although the council is considering adding some additional ones a few years from now. Right now, our focus really is on achieving our ISO certification, which represents that international standard that I mentioned. So there's two types of communication certifications. First is the CMP, or the Communication Management Professional, and that's really for folks that are fairly well established in their careers. They have a few years of experience. They might be a communication manager or a director, and really looking to solidify and demonstrate their competence both to their employers and to other professionals. Then there's the Strategic Communication Management Professional, or SCMP, which is for people who are a little bit further along in their career. They have more years of experience. They're probably leading a communication function or perhaps second in command in a communication function, but they're spending as much time working on strategy as they are on communications tactics and working very directly with the leadership of their organizations. Both of these programs, as I've mentioned, were developed to conform to ISO standards for professional certification. And that's another important difference from the old ABC program, is the way it was designed, we couldn't have achieved an ISO certification for that program. So why get certified? Well, first of all, it can give you a real competitive advantage in the job market. It can increase your earning potential and offer you a lot more opportunities, especially these days when we're all competing with thousands of other people in the job market thanks to the internet and social media. But we found in a variety of studies out there and across all professions, recruiters say they're 3 times more likely to shortlist you as an applicant for a job if you have a certification. Now, I say that's across all professions, so that's not specific to communications. And these statistics all apply to all professions. And then on average, professionals who have a bachelor's degree or more and certification tend to earn on average about 18% more than those that don't have certification. So there's an opportunity for you to earn more money. And certified professionals are also much more likely to get pay raises and to be promoted more quickly than their non-certified peers. It can also mean more job satisfaction for you as well and happiness with your career. Again, across all professions, we found that almost 2/3 of certified professionals say that they're satisfied and fulfilled with their jobs versus just 38% for professionals who don't have any kind of a certification. So as you can see, you can have a real sense of achievement for getting that certification. It helps elevate your professional status. You're recognized amongst your peers as being an expert in your field. And it really can help you justify the investment that you're making in yourself and in your career through a variety of professional development. As I mentioned, the certification is a little different than the old accreditation program. And the certification really is about defining a common body of knowledge for communications professionals, and really across all disciplines of communication. So not necessarily just public relations or marketing communications, but really it's broad-based and covering all those disciplines. And so the expectation is that people that hold certification have a very deep level of knowledge and experience in 6 key areas. And those include ethics, strategy, analysis, context, engagement, and consistency. As I mentioned, it differs from the old program. The ABC program measured skills and experience primarily, and although there was an exam, there was a requirement for a portfolio and for a panel interview of the person who was applying for accreditation. Unfortunately, that style of accreditation didn't fit the global ISO standard, and so the new GCCC program is more a measure of knowledge to be consistent with ISO than of measuring experience and skills. And the reason that we decided to do that is, again, so that we could have a global certification that was just as relevant for people in Europe or Africa or Asia or Latin America as it is for us here in North America. Pat, do we have any questions yet?
Yes. Here's a question. Have employers in the U.S. and other parts of the world expressed a strong interest in ISO certification for communication professionals as part of their recruiting criteria? And how did GCCC come up with those 6 categories?
Well, let's start with our employers looking for certification. That's something that the GCCC and the IABC, quite frankly, are working very hard on building demand for certified professionals. They're well recognized in the United States and in Canada, in fact, more so in Canada. But we really wanted to make sure that employers worldwide started looking for and wanting to hire certified professionals, and so that it really would make the candidates stand out. And so we decided to move this direction so that we could start being a driving force for that change and helping employers to look for and, quite frankly, to demand certified professionals to fill their roles. So it's getting there, it's growing. We're not quite where we want to be yet, but as the number of certified communicators continues to grow, we see, and through some marketing strategies and other things that the GCCC is doing, and some partnerships that we're seeking with other organizations, such as with HR professionals, we see that we're going to be able to continue to build demand for certified professionals worldwide. And what was the second part of the question?
How did you come up with those 6 categories?
That was an effort of IABC to really identify what were the most important areas of professional practice for business communicators. And that was a lengthy discernment process that IABC went through to develop that global standard. But also, when they were developing the standard, had the ISO requirements side by side with those things to make sure that we were identifying the kinds of skill sets that a certified professional would need to have regardless of their profession.
Okay, and one question, how close is our program to receiving ISO certification?
Well, I'm going to talk about that at the end of my presentation, Pat. We're in the process of working with the ISO organization now, and I'll talk about that in a couple minutes.
Good.
So as I mentioned, certified professionals have to demonstrate a very deep level of knowledge and expertise, focused on those 6 core principles that I mentioned. So ethics, strategy, analysis, context, engagement, and consistency. again, based on IABC's global standard for communication professionals. So the examinations have been built to assess candidates on a number of different business communication domains that are tied directly to these 6 principles. So if you're applying to become a CMP, a Certified Communication Management Professional, the minimum requirement is 8 years of professional experience and 40 hours of training, or 6 years experience, 2 years of college level education, and 40 hours of recent training. For the SCMP, we require a minimum of 11 years of experience, 20 hours of training, and a letter of recommendation from someone in an organization that the professional has worked with outside of their work relationship. So not work you did for your company, but work that you've done for a nonprofit or a professional association in communication leadership. And I know all of you are thinking about, well, what counts as training? That seems like a lot of hours of training. And how can I prove that I've had that training? There's a number of different ways you can demonstrate that training. One of which is going to professional conferences like IABC's regional conference or world conference. If you attend a world conference, you've put in lots and lots of hours attending various workshops and seminars that all count towards your training. You can take various online courses and webinars in the field. As you may know, we've got the IABC Academy online for members of IABC, and there are a number of courses in there that also count towards your training requirement for certification and for maintenance. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can attain those training hours requirements in order to qualify as an applicant for CMP. Documentation is fairly straightforward as well. Just need proof that you've attended a program. So for example, if you attend a conference, you'll probably have a copy of a conference program guide or a receipt from signing up for training. And so these are simple ways that you can document and prove that you've attended certain training programs. So it's really fairly easy to, number one, to get those hours. You can add up 20 to 40 hours of training quicker than you think. And also to document it and prove that you're ready to sit for the certification exam. Let's talk about the exam itself. It's done electronically, but it is a proctored test. And again, has to be that way to conform to ISO. So you can't sit and take your test from your desk at home. You have to go to one of the testing sites and dates. And we're getting more and more of those as the program continues to grow. And take the test at that site. You're allowed 3 hours in total to take the exam. It's 100 multiple choice questions, and it's based on that practice analysis that we went through that identified the domains of practice, the kind of tasks that are performed there, and what kind of knowledge is required. They're rigorous exams. I can speak to that personally. I've taken both of them. And they are also designed to be very objective and ensure that those that pass are really crossing a high bar in terms of that knowledge and experience. Any new questions, Pat?
No.
Okay.
This is Amy. I just wanted to mention one thing because we probably have some people who joined after we told them how to participate in the chat. The chat is in a ribbon on your screen. So if you mouse down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see your Zoom ribbon, and there's a chat button. If you double click on that, you can watch the chat and you can participate in the chat, and we will be happy to bring your questions to Deb as she proceeds or at the end. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Amy. And again, feel free to ask questions. I've got a number of them at the end that I'm going to address for you, but we'll have plenty of time today to get to all of your questions. And for those of you who may be attending the Heritage Region Conference in November, I will be there. I'll be speaking at the conference and would love to meet you and talk further if you'd like to do that. So let's talk about where the questions focus on each exam. So the CMP exam really covers 5 business communication domains. First and foremost is ethics. And if you're a member of IABC, you've already committed to the IABC Code of Ethics. And so there are a number of questions focused on ethical practices. Research and analysis is another important area for a business communicator. And so there are questions related to how you conduct research and analyze data. Strategy and engagement, again, more increasingly important for communicators these days, is understanding strategy and how to engage your stakeholders. Next is consistency and strategic implementation. So questions related to how do you implement tactics related to the strategies that have been developed for any particular need. And finally, communication measurement. Now for the SCMP, you're expected to have knowledge in those 5 domains from the CMP, but then at a higher level, you're also going to have questions on the exam related to advising senior executives and leading communication teams. There are questions on managing a communications function. There's questions on developing strategy, whereas the CMP is about implementing strategy. The SCMP really gets into how to develop communication strategy. Innovation is another important area that's tested. Ethics, again, at a higher level. And finally, reputation management, which also includes an element of crisis communication.
Deb, there's a question.
Okay.
Are questions on the exam grouped by domains? Like a series of questions on ethics followed by a series of questions on strategy? Do question choices require minute discrimination or more general discrimination?
The first question, are they in groups? No. They are fed randomly to your computer. It's the same 100 questions for everyone who sits for the test, but they come up in a different order. So everyone's going to see those questions in a random order as they take the test. They are not grouped by domains. And in terms of minute, the way that the test has been designed is so that for most of the questions, there should be a very clear right answer. But for some questions, particularly in terms of strategy and execution, there may be a little bit more minute differences to look at and potentially a little bit more challenging to answer the questions.
Okay.
All righty. Let's talk about maintaining your certification briefly. As a certified professional, we're expected to stay up to date with the current practice of communications, the changes in our professions. We're also expected to help contribute to the body of knowledge and the development of other professionals. So sharing what we've learned, mentoring young professionals, being active in a professional association or other organization where we have the opportunity to practice our profession and help mentor and develop other professionals. That's really a key part of what certification is all about. So each year you have a requirement to renew your certification, and there are 7 different areas that you can get points. And so you need to get 40 points annually in at least 3 of these 7 categories that you see online. So professional reading, that can be reading books, academic journals, other kinds of professional journals, attending a recognized training or course of study. So if you go to, let's say, a crisis communication course, or you take a master's level course, those will count towards your points. Attending professional events. This event today counts for an hour towards those points that you need to qualify to sit for the exam or to maintain your certification. Be part of the GCCC. You can get credit if you work with the GCCC to help us continue to grow the program. If you mentor or coach other professionals outside of your job, so we're not talking about people who might be your direct reports, but perhaps you're mentoring through your IABC chapter or another outside organization. If you take a leadership role in a professional association, that garners you some points. So if you're a chapter officer, you get some points for that. And finally, the publication of original research. We know we have a lot of folks, members in IABC and others who work in the world of academia, and they do a lot of original research. And so the publication of any of those kinds of research also count towards your maintenance. 40 points may seem like a lot, but I can tell you, having gone through it for a few years now, that it's a lot easier than you might think to add up those 40 points.
Deb, here's a couple questions. How many points is each activity worth? Like 1 hour is 1 point?
You can earn a maximum of a certain number of points in each category, and you'll be awarded either 5 points or 10 points for each activity. So for example, if you read a book, I believe that's 5 points. Attending professional events or recognized training can be worth up to a maximum of 20 points for various things. And so, of course, there's more detail to it that I don't have in front of me right now, but it doesn't go for 1 hour of study, but they will look at the body of the work that you did and the number of hours, especially for training or professional events, the number of hours that you participated in. So for example, for World Conference, because that goes on for 3.5 days, you might end up with a total of perhaps 20 hours worth of workshops and seminars that you've attended. That would completely fulfill your maximum on that professional event category. So again, it's really a lot quicker and easier than it may seem to get those points. I can tell you that in the last 2 years on my maintenance, I've routinely had 60 to 70 points very easily to maintain my certification.
Okay, one more question back to the exam. Can you skip a question and then return to it?
Yes.
Okay, and are pencils and papers provided to note for yourself which questions were skipped?
The software does that for you. So once you get to the end of the test, if you skip some questions, it will tell you you did not answer question 34 and question 72, and it will give you the ability to go back and revisit those questions again.
Good.
Any more questions?
Nope.
Okay, let's keep moving. We're going to let you out of here a little bit early today. Depends on how much Q&A we have. These are a few of the questions that were submitted in advance. I thank you for all of these. So we'll go through these quickly, and then we'll see if we have any additional questions. So the first one, are the exam questions reflective of current communication tools and platforms? And secondly, do you need to know everything about everything? Let's start with the first one. Exam questions, yes, are reflective of current communication tools and platforms. In fact, for us to maintain ISO certification and be prepared for ISO, we have to refresh the test every 2 years. And so part of the role of the GCCC, and in particular, I'm past chair. I was chairman last year, but so now I'm chairman of the exam subcommittee. And so our role is to recruit question writers and reviewers to really take a look at what may have changed since the last test was written and make sure that we're adding new questions to the question pool that are reflective of changes that we see in technology, of tools, and various different ways that we're seeing change in our industries. And then, do you need to know everything about everything? No, you don't. And I think a lot of the questions, the answers are really common sense. I can tell you that the one area where we've seen the most people stumble, and one that I would suggest you spend some time on, is the strategy and execution domain. We're not all public relations people. Some people are Marcom or they're designers, and they don't necessarily get involved in media relations or some of these kinds of things. And so it's important to have a broad general knowledge, but I would say you don't have to know everything about everything. And bearing in mind, too, that you don't have to get 100% correct on the test. The threshold for passing does vary somewhat, and it just depends on the number of people who sit for the exam each time and what that threshold is. But typically, it's somewhere around 70%. And so you could miss up to 30 questions and still pass the test. Next question, when did you take the test and do you continue to see it as a benefit? Provide examples. I took the first test for CMP almost 3 years ago in early 2016. I was probably the second or third exam sitting after the program was launched, and I took it at Leadership Institute and passed. I took SCMP. I sat for that with the very first group of SCMPs at World Conference in Washington, D.C. last year. Do I see it as a benefit? I absolutely do. I've done a lot of postgraduate study, but never completed a master's degree. And as I said, it was really something that personally I wanted to do for myself. And I think it certainly helps position my brand and my consulting firm's brand, that we are led by a certified professional. I think my clients appreciate that, and it helps give them some confidence and assurance that they're dealing with a skilled professional. So I have every intention of continuing to maintain my certification as long as I am a communications practitioner. Let's see next. So I've heard it's not an exam you study for. How much reviewing, refreshing studying did you do? I'm embarrassed to tell you guys I didn't study at all, but I'd been doing this stuff for 25 plus, nearly 30 years by the time I finally sat for the test. And so I felt that I had a good, that I understood the domains and all of those different practice areas, that I had a good command of my profession, and that I knew enough to be able to pass the test. But again, I was probably an exception that proves the rule there. The Academy does have a number of review courses available to you to kind of refresh your knowledge. But it is very important to have a general knowledge in each one of those domain areas. When taking the exam, what did you feel you were most prepared for, least prepared for? I'm one of those goofy people that's really good at taking multiple choice tests. And it only took me about an hour to complete the test, much to the chagrin of some of the other people in the room, but I'm just a quick test taker. So I felt very comfortable that I was going to be able to sit down and work my way through the questions pretty quickly. Honestly, I don't think there was anything I was not least prepared for. Again, with my broad-based background, I had a pretty good command of a lot of different disciplines of professional communications practice. But even myself, just like a lot of other folks that we've seen sit for the test, I think I probably did fall a little bit short on the strategy piece. And so I probably would have spent some time doing some review on communication strategy. And this came up earlier, where's GCC at with ISO accreditation? In order to apply for ISO accreditation, a program has to have been up and running for at least 2 years. And so we applied earlier this year for ISO accreditation for the CMP program. We're not yet eligible to apply for SCMP, although we will be eligible as of next year. We went through the first application process earlier this year, and the ISO auditors came back to us with a long list of things that we needed to look at and to refine and come back and make some changes, particularly in some policies and some documentation, especially, that needed to be developed in order for us to achieve accreditation. So right now, the GCCC is working with a consultant who is an ISO accreditation specialist, and they are helping us to develop the documentation and the procedures that they noted as deficiencies in our initial submission. And so the plan is by early next year, we will have corrected all of those things and we will be prepared to resubmit. Now, once you submit for ISO, it can take up to a year before the process is complete and you actually earn that accreditation. It's a very rigorous review of the entire program, really from head to toe. And another audit takes place, and personal interviews with the leaders of the GCCC and a number of different things. And so once we reapply, we expect it to take anywhere from 6 months to a year for us to achieve it. But we're very confident at this point with the input that we've gotten from the ISO and with the consultant that we have in place that we will be able to correct what we need to correct, and we'll be able to earn that accreditation next year. So,
All right, there's a few more questions.
Awesome.
One good question, well, they're all good questions, but if you cannot maintain your certification 1 year, perhaps due to family obligations or illness, do you have to start all over again?
That's a really good question, and one that I think you would have to ask Dr. Foudy. Sarah Foudy is the program manager for certification. My recollection is that you would have to start over again, but I think there is a grace period from your renewal date that you have to renew, but I would ask Dr. Foudy to clarify that for us.
Okay. It looked to one of the participants like the exam was being given primarily in Canada. What are the plans to give the test in the U.S.? And I will say, you know, we've said that it's been at the World Conference, the regional conferences, LI. But I don't know that there's dates in 2019 yet.
There is at least one date in 2019, and that is LI, which is being held in Long Beach in February. But we're working closely with chapters, hoping that chapters will host exams. It's really not difficult to do, and obtaining the test site and having someone who is available and trained to be a proctor for the test. Yeah, Canada has done quite a bit, but they've always been a leader even in the prior accreditation program. And Canadian employers very much seek accredited and certified communications professionals. So the Canadians have done an awesome job of making certification a real driving force in the hiring practices of companies up there. So we're seeing a growing list. Every year we get more and more chapters and more places that are hosting exams. We're also trying to get exams outside of North America. So at the Asia Pacific region conference last month, the exam was held. There's been one held in, at least one in Europe and one in the Middle East as well. And so it's just a matter of having these kind of conversations with chapter leaders and getting the word out and helping them to schedule an exam that's going to work for their chapter.
Okay, I understand that DC chapter is going to have a test in January. So that's
awesome.
that's another chapter.
Awesome.
A couple more questions. So if the score you said could vary by how many people are taking it, etc. One of the participants says, do you mean that the passing score is designed to eliminate the lowest X number of people that are taking the test at a location on that day?
No. And again, the structure of how that cutoff works is a great question for Dr. Foudy. It doesn't vary by much. But the cutoff has nothing to do with how many people are sitting the test at any given time. And that's why I say it's somewhere around 70% of the questions have to be passed in order to achieve certification.
Okay. Are there practice questions on the GCCC website?
There are practice questions for the CMP exam on the site. We are working on, but have not posted any sample questions for the SCMP yet. They are representative of the kinds of questions that you will take, but they are not actual questions from the test.
Okay. How do you submit your proof to maintain the certification? Is it online? And also, do you get any email reminders, or is it up to you to remember to continually submit your proof of maintenance?
Great questions. You will get a reminder from Dr. Foudy when you're nearing your renewal date. So you don't have to worry about remembering it. Although I can tell you, every time I attend a program or do something that I know will count, I throw it in a folder so that when it's time for me to do my maintenance requirements, I have everything at hand. Sarah will send you a form, a very simple form to fill out where you notate how you add up your own points, and you say, I attended this program and it's 10 points, 20 points. And then you just scan copies of the documentation, which can be anything from a certificate of completion, again, to a copy of a program or a receipt for signing up for something. And I take all of those things along with that form that I fill out, I scan them, I turn them into a PDF, and I email them to Dr. Foudy. And she goes through and confirms that everything that I've posted is eligible, and she does some spot quality checking to make sure that I'm being honest. And that's all there is to it.
Is this maintenance based on a calendar year, or is it based on the date you passed the test?
It is based on when you pass the test. So your year would be the last of the month, a year following the month that you sat for and passed the test.
One more. Can you provide some examples of what would be acceptable as meeting the recommendation for work outside of your day job? This attendee says it's going to be a tough one for her, although she's aligned more with the SCMP exam in terms of experience. I think some people have such a hard day job, they're not able to volunteer outside as much as they would like.
Understood. It is an important component, but perhaps you have done some of that in the recent past. Perhaps in the last few years, you volunteered with a nonprofit for a short period of time and helped them out with some communication needs. I can tell you, I today sit on a board for a nonprofit organization where I am here in Denver, and I started out as a volunteer, and I helped with their communications plans and their marketing plans, and that helped me to get that requirement when I was applying for SCMP. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something you're doing today, but something that you have done.
Does volunteering with IABC count?
Yes.
Another question, are there more exam opportunities this year? And I just checked, and it looked to me like the November Heritage Region Conference was the last one in the calendar year of 2018.
As far as I know, that is the last one in the calendar year, especially in the Heritage Region. But new exam sites are being added all the time. So it's still possible that there might be an additional opportunity to sit for the test before the end of this year.
And they are listed online, right? You need to continually check that.
gcccouncil.org.
Do we know what the deadline to register for that exam is? I think we talked about perhaps that they would need 2 weeks to check everything, but I think it might depend which exam you are registering for.
I don't think it matters which exam you're registering for, but if you haven't applied for certification, you have to get your application in at least 2 weeks before a test, because we have to have the opportunity to review that application and determine whether or not the candidate is eligible to sit for the test. Right, and that's what takes some time, because they do, go in and check everything that you provide on that application, and that just takes some time to do. But then once you've been accepted and told that you can sit for the exam, then you don't need a lot of advance time to register for the test.
So the exam at the Heritage Region is going to be Saturday, November 10th in Richmond, Virginia, if anybody is interested in that. And the, the date for the exam, yeah, that's the next one, November 10th. And then, the other thing I was going to say is, isn't it true that if you already are an accredited business communicator, you do not need to go through the application process?
That's absolutely right. If you're already an ABC, you automatically qualify to sit for the exam. You still have to go in and complete the application and submit it, but it's very easy for you to go in there and say, I'm an accredited business communicator, and then you automatically qualify to sit for either test.
Good. Well, right now, that's the last question, Deb. Is there anything that you thought of since questions are coming up?
Oh, well, I do want to share my contact information with everyone online today. And this will apply to anyone who sees this recording even later on. If you think of some more questions later, if you want to learn a little bit more about the certification process, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk with anyone further about the program. Having been through both tests, having led the organization, I have kind of a unique combination of experience with our certification program, and I would be more than happy to chat with any of you at your convenience. So you've got my email address there on screen, you've got my phone number. Don't hesitate to reach out anytime. I would love to chat with you. And again, as I said, I'll be at the Heritage Region Conference as well. So if you want to chat face-to-face, let me know. We can arrange to meet over a cup of coffee or a good glass of wine, and we can talk certification.
That sounds great. Well, thank you, Deb. I know that we could talk about this topic for more time, but we've reached about the end of this. In the chat box, there was an email. If there's questions about certification in the Heritage Region, you can email me, and well, it comes to me, but it's certification@iabcheritage.com. So, and then you have the details from Deb. So I would like to thank everybody for joining us. And wait, we might have one more new one. Let me see. No, I think that's it. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Deb, for your time and presenting. This will be recorded and it will be actually available for people beyond the Heritage Region. And then stay tuned for your link to your survey and your these resources.
Great.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.